My fiancé's brother slid a photo album across the table, and I knew the carefully cataloged history of my broken relationships was about to be used to build the case for an enormous sentence. They had the evidence to link me to a deadly, organized scheme, and the only way out was proving that the betrayal ran far deeper than a canceled wedding. The air in the sterile conference room was thick, not with humidity, but with unspoken accusations. The overhead fluorescents hummed, casting a sickly yellow glow over the polished mahogany table. Across from me sat Amelia, my fiancée, her usually vibrant blue eyes narrowed into slits of icy suspicion. Beside her, radiating a calm that was far more terrifying than any outburst, was her brother, Marcus, a senior partner at a very influential, very protective law firm. "Look at this, Alex," Amelia said, her voice tight, barely above a whisper. She slid a heavy, matte-finish photo album across the table. It wasn't the album itself that made my blood run cold. It was the familiar, almost theatrical way Marcus had set it down, like a stage prop in a particularly nasty play. I didn't need to open it. I knew what was inside. My past, meticulously cataloged, dredged up from the darkest corners of the internet and God knows where else. The date was 6 months ago, the day before our engagement party. Marcus had suddenly developed an intense interest in my professional background, citing due diligence for my integration into Amelia's family's business empire. Now I knew the truth of that diligence. I leaned back, trying to project an aura of wounded innocence, the kind you practice in the mirror before a difficult conversation. "Amelia, what is this? More of your family's paranoid fantasies?" She ignored me, flipping the cover open with a snap. The first page wasn't a picture of me. It was a screenshot of an old, defunct social media profile, clearly years before I'd even met Amelia. The caption beneath it, bolded in digital red text that Marcus must have added, read, "The pre-Amelia Alex, a trail of superficial connections and questionable judgment." "Don't insult my intelligence, Alex," Marcus cut in, his voice smooth as oiled chrome. He steepled his fingers. "We aren't talking about poor taste in college fashion. We're talking about patterns. This," he tapped a page, "is Clara. Dated her for 3 months 5 years ago. You called her your soulmate in a public forum. 2 weeks after you broke up, she was being interviewed about her messy departure from a startup because of internal mismanagement. Guess who used to work at that startup?" My mouth was dry. Clara. A ghost from a life I'd tried hard to scrub clean when I started dating Amelia. It was a brief, intense relationship that ended badly because I realized she was far too ambitious and, frankly, ethically flexible for my tastes. She was an acquaintance I managed, the lie tasting like ash. An acquaintance you spent a weekend sharing a very secluded cabin with, according to the geotags on this. Marcus slid a printout showing blurry vacation snaps. "And here's Chloe. Remember Chloe? The one who moved to the city right after you two decided you needed space? She started selling counterfeit luxury goods online within a month. You introduced her to half your social circle, Alex. People Amelia trusts." The narrative Marcus was constructing was terrifyingly effective. I wasn't just a man with a few messy breakups. I was a catalyst for chaos, a revolving door of unstable women whom I, somehow, had corrupted or inspired toward questionable paths. "This is character assassination," I protested, my voice rising. "We dated. People date. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Are you suggesting I am responsible for every choice they made after we parted ways?" Amelia finally looked up, and the betrayal in her eyes was a physical blow. "It's not just who you dated, Alex. It's how. Look at the timeline. Every serious relationship you've had, the ones you conveniently omitted from your background disclosure, ends abruptly, and shortly after, something volatile happens in that woman's life. It suggests a pattern of emotional devastation or, worse, manipulation." She turned to a later section of the album. This one felt heavier, the paper thicker. This wasn't just old girlfriends. This was recent. "And then there's Elena," she breathed, pointing a perfectly manicured nail at a photo of a striking woman with fiery red hair, taken perhaps a year and a half ago, 6 months before I met Amelia. "She was very important to you. Your LinkedIn profile suggests a brief but intense professional mentorship. But Elena didn't just disappear, did she? She was working on securing major government contracts for infrastructure review. And then, suddenly, she resigns, citing unbearable pressure and privacy violations. My palms were sweating. Elena. She was the closest I'd ever come to a true intellectual partner, but our parting had been a mutual, painful acknowledgement that our life paths were diverging. She was fiercely private, protective of her career. I haven't spoken to Elena in over a year, Amelia. This is reaching, Marcus. You're dredging up old gossip. Marcus smiled, a thin, bloodless expression. Gossip is anecdotal, Alex. Evidence is documented. The service internal investigation team that looked into Elena's sudden departure found a curious anomaly in their exit interview transcription. They noted she mentioned an intense, anonymous source of pressure that was feeding her insecure information, leading her to make rash decisions. He paused for maximum effect, leaning forward so his shadow enveloped the photos. Guess what was feeding her that pressure? Anonymous messages sent from an encrypted network that, when cross-referenced with IP histories from that period, showed a highly unusual traffic pattern routed through a server associated with, wait for it, your old university email address. The air went out of the room. This wasn't about broken hearts anymore. This was about calculated sabotage. If they could prove I had actively interfered with a professional handling sensitive government data, even indirectly, even if I hadn't intended harm, the implications were staggering. This wasn't just grounds for calling off a wedding. This was a potential path to a very serious charge involving interference with proprietary information, something that could easily balloon into a case of corporate espionage, or even something much darker, depending on how far Marcus was willing to push this narrative. I never sent any messages, I insisted, my voice hoarse. Someone is framing me. Someone is using my old digital footprint. Amelia's lower lip trembled, but her eyes remained hard. That's what everyone says when the evidence stacks up, Alex. And that's where we get to the final piece of evidence. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small, sealed evidence bag. Inside wasn't paper or a photograph. It was a sleek, modern flash drive, the kind used for high-capacity data storage. When we were looking into Elena, Amelia continued, her voice chillingly calm, the internal security audit team found something strange in the server logs of the firm that was overseeing her projects. They discovered that someone, very recently, last Tuesday in fact, attempted to access Elena's old archive files using a series of escalating brute force passwords. They failed, but the attempt left a digital fingerprint. She placed the bag down next to the photo album. The system flagged the attempted access point. It didn't trace back to you directly, Alex. That would be too easy. But it traced back to a specific, highly customized VPN configuration. A configuration that, according to forensic data recovered from your work laptop last night, yes, we had IT run a deep, unscheduled diagnostic, was installed and activated precisely 2 hours before that failed access attempt. My mind raced. My work laptop. I had barely touched it this week, relying on my personal tablet. I knew about VPNs, sure, but installing a highly customized backdoor? Never. That doesn't prove anything. You went through my work property without my permission, I sputtered, the defense feeling flimsy even to my own ears. We have probable cause to suspect you are actively tampering with evidence related to a security breach, Alex, Marcus countered smoothly, leaning back, finally allowing a hint of triumph to color his tone. And here is the crucial detail, the one that makes this entire collection of photos relevant. We traced the VPN installation file. It wasn't downloaded from a public forum. It was shared via a secure, private messaging service, a service you and I, Amelia and I, use for sensitive family communications. He looked directly at Amelia. Show him the last communication, dear. Amelia swallowed hard, her face pale. She opened a file on her own phone and turned the screen toward me. It was a text thread showing a file attachment sent from her phone to mine, time-stamped Monday night. The file name, visible in the preview, was innocuous, wedding_seating_draft_v3.pdf. That file was never opened by you, Alex, Amelia whispered, her voice breaking, because when IT scanned your laptop this morning, they found the VPN installation package buried inside the metadata wrapper of that seating chart. Someone planted that installer on your system using a file shared by me, and that installer contained the key to attempt to hack into those government archives yesterday. I stared at the screen, utterly dumbfounded. The timeline was impossibly tight. Planted evidence, using Amelia's own secure channel, timed perfectly to frame me for a recent, serious digital intrusion linked to a woman from my past. I didn't do this, I managed, looking from the flash drive to Amelia's haunted face. Someone is setting me up, Amelia. Someone who has access to your communications. Someone who knows about my past dates. Someone who wants to destroy me. Marcus steepled his fingers again, his gaze sharp. That's what we are trying to determine, Alex. The question is, who benefits most from you being linked to this kind of attempt? Is it a jilted ex who finally got smart enough to frame you? Or is it someone closer? Someone who has been intimate with Amelia, someone who has access to her communication devices, someone who knows the nuances of your history so intimately that they can fabricate this entire scenario. He paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the silence. We called in the authorities, Alex, not for a heavy charge yet, but to review the digital evidence regarding Elena's potential breach. They are very interested in who would attempt to access those files using that specific VPN configuration. He tapped the flash drive containing the physical evidence, and the agents from the Service Internal Security will be here shortly to ask you some very pointed questions about your relationship with Elena and why your digital ghost seems to be working overtime to incriminate you. Now, before they arrive, tell me, Alex. Marcus's voice dropped to a near hiss. Who is the one person you know who has the motive, the technical skill, and the proximity to Amelia to orchestrate this elaborate frame job involving the photos of your past? I looked at Amelia, tears finally welling in my eyes, not for my reputation, but for the ruin of my future. The logic, however twisted, was devastatingly complete. Only someone with deep access and deep knowledge could pull this off with such surgical precision. I suddenly remembered a casual remark Marcus had made months ago about his own frustrations with the family's security protocols, and a cold dread washed over me. You think I'm a loose end, don't you, Marcus? I whispered. Marcus didn't flinch. I think you're a liability, Alex. Now, who is your first choice for who set this up? I opened my mouth, ready to defend myself against the entire frame-up, ready to point the finger at the only person who fit the profile of a meticulous saboteur with unlimited access to Amelia's world. But before I could utter a single word, the conference room door clicked open, and two grim-faced men in dark suits stood silhouetted against the hallway light. They weren't just the internal audit team. They looked federal. Mr. Thorne, one of them said, his voice devoid of warmth, we need you to come with us. We have some questions regarding potential interference with national security data, and we believe your fiancé's brother is a cooperating witness. The introduction of the federal agents slammed the door shut on any hope of a rational conversation. Marcus's composure, which had been unshakable moments before, seemed to deepen, morphing into an almost regal acceptance of the developing situation. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod toward the agents. Gentlemen, Marcus said, rising smoothly, never breaking eye contact with me. I've provided you with the preliminary documentation we compiled. Alex, you'll find everything you need is in that album and on that drive. Be cooperative. It will be much easier. Amelia was frozen, staring at her brother as if seeing a stranger standing where her confidant had been. Her breath hitched, and she finally broke. Marcus, what have you done? You said you were just reviewing his past. You didn't say you were bringing in law enforcement. Marcus gave her a patronizing look, the kind reserved for a child who has misunderstood a complex adult negotiation. I secured the family assets, Amelia. I followed protocol. Alex was becoming entangled in things we couldn't control. This is containment. Containment. That word echoed in the sudden, heavy silence. They weren't protecting Amelia from me. They were protecting the family from the potential liability I represented, and Marcus had engineered the entire scenario to look like I was the reckless party scrambling to cover up past and present digital transgressions. I was escorted out, the agents flanking me with the impersonal efficiency of trained professionals. As we passed Amelia, I tried one last time to appeal to the woman I thought I knew. Amelia, please, Don't believe them. Marcus is manipulating this. Think about it. He was the one who introduced the idea of the background check. He's the one who brought up Elena. He is the one who stands to gain control of everything if I am removed. She lifted her chin, her face streaked with silent tears, but her resolve was terrifyingly solid. You know what I think, Alex? I think you are very clever. You are charming, you are ambitious, and you are resourceful. I thought those were the qualities I loved. Now, I realize they are the qualities of a man who knows exactly how to build a shell around himself. She gestured toward the evidence bag Marcus had so theatrically placed. That drive, those photos, they are just the surface. You were caught trying to cover up something related to Elena, and now you're grasping at straws, trying to blame my brother. Her final pronouncement was a death knell. He's not my first choice for anything, Alex, but right now, he's the only one making sense. The walk to the unmarked government vehicle felt like a march to the gallows. The agents led me not to a police station, but to a discreet, soundproofed office building downtown, a place dedicated to handling sensitive corporate and internal security matters. The questioning began immediately. It wasn't aggressive. It was surgical. They weren't interested in my feelings for Clara or Chloe. They were laser-focused on the attempted access of Elena's archival data last Tuesday. Mr. Thorne, the lead investigator, Agent Davis stated, his eyes never leaving the notes in front of him. The system flagged the attempted brute force attack on the infrastructure security logs. We have the timestamp. We have the specific configuration of the decryption tool used. We have an independent confirmation that this configuration was installed on your dedicated work machine. I never installed it, I repeated, gripping the edge of the uncomfortable chair. It was planted. It had to be planted through that file Amelia sent me. And why, Agent Davis pressed, leaning forward, would Amelia send you a file containing malicious software disguised as a wedding seating chart? Because Marcus made her. He's using her trust in him to set me up. He's the one who brought up Elena's sensitive contracts. He's the one who benefits from me being neutralized before the merger closes. They exchanged a look that confirmed they had already run background checks on Marcus and found nothing. Marcus, the pillar of the legal community, the devoted brother, untouchable. Mr. Thorne, Agent Davis sighed, pulling out a fresh stack of papers. We are not accusing you of being a master criminal. We are saying you have a pattern of being involved with women who then experience professional upheaval, and you were caught attempting a digital intrusion related to one of them just days ago. That looks like a pattern of self-preservation, or, at minimum, severe recklessness. It's a frame job designed to look exactly like self-preservation, I shot back, growing desperate. Think about the timing. Why would I wait a year and a half after leaving Elena to try and break into her files now? And why would I use a VPN configuration that Marcus himself would recognize as mine, which he knows I use on my work machine, through a file sent by Amelia, only to have Marcus immediately leverage that discovery with the photos of my other ex-girlfriends? The sheer, convoluted elegance of the plan Marcus had engineered was starting to break through their procedural wall. They had the evidence pointing to me, but my counter-argument pointed inescapably to Marcus's Machiavellian planning. Davis rubbed his temples. We understand your assertion about Mr. Marcus Thorne. However, he is a key player in guiding the family's legal defense and regulatory compliance. He has leverage. You, Mr. Thorne, have only the circumstantial defense of your character. My character? I laughed, a dry, rattling sound. You mean the character Amelia just publicly disavowed, based on curated photos. The character Marcus painted as a threat to her stability. Just then, my phone vibrated in the pocket of the trousers they had allowed me to keep. It was a notification from my private cloud storage, a service completely separate from my work accounts, used only for personal documents and encrypted journals. It was unusual. I hadn't accessed it in days. Agent Davis noticed the movement, and his eyes sharpened. What was that? I pulled the phone out, my heart hammering against my ribs, driven by a sudden, illogical hunch. I opened the notification. It was an automatic integrity check log for my journal backup. The system had flagged a recent unauthorized access attempt, immediately aborted by my encryption protocols. Someone just tried to access my private journal, I said, my voice barely a breath. They failed, but they logged the attempt. Agent Davis snatched the phone. He quickly analyzed the log data. The access attempt originated from an IP address registered locally. Wait a minute. He frowned, looking up at the other agent. This IP trace points to a private network node on the upper floors of the Thorne family conglomerate tower. This was the opening I needed. It wasn't an ex-girlfriend with a vendetta. It wasn't some random hacker. It was someone inside Amelia's fortress, someone with access to the secure corporate intranet, trying to find corroborating evidence, my deepest, most private thoughts, to solidify Marcus's narrative. They weren't trying to plant evidence anymore. They were trying to confirm the motive they had already manufactured. Marcus is not cooperating with you, I asserted, leaning in. He is directing this entire investigation from the inside. He's using your legitimate resources to search for evidence that doesn't exist in my past, because he is the one who manufactured the digital evidence linking me to Elena. Davis hesitated, looking at the log. The access point was too close to Marcus's known offices. If you're telling the truth, Mr. Thorne, and Marcus is manipulating this entire process, why would he expose himself by trying to access your private data from the corporate network right now? I looked down at the phone, the IP address burning into my vision, and the final, chilling realization hit me. Marcus hadn't just set me up to look reckless. He had set me up to look guilty of something far more serious, and he had engineered this entire meeting to ensure I would be detained before the real digital threat materialized. He didn't expose himself, I whispered, the blood draining from my face as I saw the full picture. He's not trying to find evidence to confirm my guilt. He's trying to wipe the trace of his involvement that Elena's breach exposed. That journal entry I made about Elena last month, the one where I wrote about a possible security flaw in the firm's new client-side encryption system, that's what he's after. He didn't just want me gone because I was a bad match. He needed me neutralized because my private observations about his own corporate maneuvering were about to land on the desk of the very federal agents who just walked in here. The door to the interrogation room burst open again, but this time it wasn't agents. It was a breathless, panicked junior executive from the Thorne firm. Agent Davis, sir, you need to see this immediately. There's been a catastrophic security alert. The main client vault, the one controlling access to the overseas shell accounts, it's been completely wiped clean. The breach was executed 20 minutes ago, and the system logs show the final clearance code was pulled directly from the personal authorization token of Marcus Thorne. The junior executive's stammered announcement shattered the fragile reality of the interrogation room. The catastrophic alert, the wiping of the main client vault, containing the family's most opaque overseas holdings, had occurred precisely when Marcus had orchestrated my detention. The precision was breathtakingly sinister. He hadn't just framed me to avoid a marriage. He had used my detainment as a perfectly timed diversion to execute a massive financial extraction. Agent Davis's professionalism finally cracked. He barked orders into his radio, his focus instantly shifting from my alleged connection to Elena's old data to the monumental theft that was happening in real time upstairs. Sir, the breach wasn't linked to Elena's files, I insisted, seizing the momentary chaos. It was linked to the real target, the shell accounts. Marcus didn't just want me out of Amelia's life. He needed me out of the building while he laundered everything he's been building. My journal entry about the encryption flaw wasn't just about general corporate security. It was about how his system was vulnerable. The other agent, Agent Miller, looked at Davis, a silent communication passing between them, confirming the new, vastly more compelling direction of the investigation. Marcus Thorne, the trusted legal mind, was suddenly the prime suspect in an economic sabotage event of staggering proportions. Davis pointed a sharp finger at me. You stay right here. Do not move or speak to anyone. You are now a key witness in a major financial crimes investigation, Mr. Thorne. Miller, I need you to secure the executive suites immediately and flag Marcus Thorne's security credentials. He's not cooperating. He's fleeing. As the two agents rushed out, their urgency signaling a complete upheaval in the chain of command, I was left alone in the stark room, the silence now filled with the deafening realization of my own near destruction. I had walked into a trap designed not just to break an engagement, but to eliminate a witness to a massive, long-running, organized scheme involving illicit assets. But the moment the adrenaline surge subsided, a new, terrifying thought surfaced, linked to the desperate attempt to access my private journal. If Marcus was currently wiping his tracks, he wouldn't just leave behind a compromised access token. He would make sure no one else could easily point the finger back at him. And my journal, the place where I documented my growing unease about Marcus's controlling nature and my suspicion that he was pushing Amelia too hard, was the key piece of evidence that could destroy his defense. I looked at my phone, still on the table. The log confirmed the remote IP trace was internal, but the method of the attempted access was still troubling. It wasn't a simple password guess. It required a specific authentication key tied to my private cloud service. Who on Marcus's team, besides Marcus himself, would have access to that key? Then it hit me, the memory flooding back with sickening clarity. Amelia. When I had first started integrating with the family, Amelia had insisted on a unified digital ecosystem for security. She had access to all my private cloud backups, ostensibly so she could help me manage my files while I adjusted to the intense work schedule. I had trusted her implicitly, and Marcus, in his meticulous planning, would have known this. He wouldn't risk using his own credentials for the final sweep. He would use the most trusted, least scrutinized vector available, Amelia's access rights. If Marcus was framing me for corporate espionage linked to Elena and simultaneously wiping his financial footprints, he had to neutralize any evidence that I suspected him. And that evidence was sitting in my private journal. I had to see that log again. I had to confirm the authentication method. I quickly scanned the room. The door was ajar, the agents gone. I grabbed my phone. I didn't have time to use a standard browser. The tracing system was too advanced. I needed to see the raw data packet that initiated the aborted attempt. I dove into the phone's developer settings, bypassing the user-friendly interface, searching for residual network packets associated with the failed login attempt. It took mere seconds, but those seconds felt like hours. The log confirmed it. The system required two-factor authentication based on a dynamically generated code, a code that was sent to the primary authorized device. I checked the log again. The code wasn't sent to my phone, which was sitting right there on the table. The log showed the code was successfully intercepted and used on a device located on the 45th floor, Marcus's primary executive suite. But wait, the initial attempt failed before the second factor was applied. The system logged two distinct attempts in rapid succession. The first attempt used an expired token, a classic sign of someone trying to use old, archived credentials. That failed attempt was logged as coming from my device's local network signal, designed to look like a desperate, last-minute panic attempt from me after I realized I was being detained. The second attempt, the one that used the correct dynamic key from the 45th floor, was the real one. Marcus had set up a failsafe. He planned for me to panic, log in myself, and thus confirm my guilt. When I didn't panic fast enough, he used his access, which meant Amelia's delegated access, to force the breach remotely and wipe the data before the feds could secure the scene. I looked at the data, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Marcus hadn't just implicated me, he had weaponized Amelia's trust against me, planning for both scenarios. If I denied everything, the digital frame-up stood. If I panicked and logged in, I confirmed the digital frame-up. The implications were devastating. Marcus was playing a multi-layered game, and Amelia was his most effective, unwitting pawn. She had given him the keys to my digital life. Suddenly, the door swung open again. It wasn't the feds. It was Amelia. She looked wild, her makeup slightly smeared, clutching a set of keys. "Alex, I don't know what's happening upstairs, but Marcus just locked down the entire executive floor. He told me he's taking a private security transport and that I'm to remain here, away from the chaos. He said he's going to handle the fallout and that I should wait for his call," she whispered urgently, her eyes wide with dawning horror as she processed the news about the vault. But I looked in his briefcase when he left the room to answer that call. "Alex, there was a passport inside, one I've never seen before, and a ticket stub for a flight leaving in 2 hours. He's running." Her voice hitched. "He framed you, didn't he? He used the history with those women. He used my trust. He used everything. To cover this massive theft and escape, he made me believe you were the threat?" Before I could confirm her horrifying realization, she held up the heavy brass keys she carried, the master keys to her father's private emergency exit elevator, the one that bypassed all lower floor security checkpoints and led directly to the underground parking garage. "We have to go, Alex. If he thinks I know he's escaping, he'll turn on me next. I have the access. Tell me what to do. Tell me what evidence you need to prove that he did this, not you, before he vanishes with everything," she pleaded, desperation warring with the last vestiges of her loyalty to her brother. I looked at the keys, then at the rapidly closing window of opportunity. I had the evidence of the attempted hack in my hand, but the key to him escaping, the one thing that would prove his guilt beyond any doubt, was Marcus's immediate departure. And Amelia had the means to get us there. "Amelia," I said, snatching the keys from her hand, my voice low and urgent. "We're not waiting for the feds to catch up. Marcus is heading for that garage right now. If we can get down there before he activates his transport, we can confront him, or at least intercept his escape vehicle. But there's a problem," I said, looking at the key ring, which also contained a small silver fob I recognized as the override for the garage's electronic gate system. "If he sees you, he'll know you betrayed him. We need to get out of this building without alerting his security detail." I stared at the elevator shaft indicator on the wall. The private elevator was supposed to be locked down by the feds, but Amelia held the override. The service entrance on the 47th floor usually connects to the fire escape access point for the main express elevator, I mused aloud, a plan forming with terrifying speed. "If Marcus is rushing to the private exit, we take the long way around. But we need to move now. If we get caught, we'll both be implicated in the theft and the evidence tampering. We are either going down together, or we expose him before he boards that plane." Amelia nodded, a steely look replacing the fear. "Lead the way, Alex. I owe you that much." We slipped out of the interrogation room, moving silently toward the service stairwell, the weight of 2 careers, a destroyed engagement, and potentially millions in stolen assets resting on our next few minutes. We reached the access panel for the 47th floor service door, and Amelia swiped her master keycard. The green light flashed, but instead of the soft click of the door unlocking, a piercing, high-pitched alarm began to shriek, echoing through the concrete corridor, immediately followed by the sound of heavy boots pounding up the main stairwell from below. "What happened?" I hissed, grabbing her arm. Amelia stared horrified at the card reader. The screen wasn't displaying "access granted." It was flashing a single, stark message: "System breach. Security lockdown initiated by user M. Thorne." The shrill electronic scream of the lockdown alarm was deafening, bouncing off the sterile walls of the service corridor. It wasn't just a standard alert, it was the sound of a total digital siege, a preemptive strike initiated by Marcus to seal off every possible exit. The green light that had momentarily offered hope vanished, replaced by a pulsing, angry red. "He locked down the override," Amelia choked out, frantically jiggling the keys in the reader. "He must have anticipated that I would come after you, or that I would try to use my own access to stop him. That door won't budge, Alex. He rerouted the entire floor security protocol." The sound of the heavy boots was getting closer, no longer sounding like the initial federal agents, but something heavier, more numerous. Private security, probably activated by Marcus's emergency lockdown command before he fled. "Forget the door," I grunted, pulling her back down the short hallway away from the immediate danger zone. "He thinks he controls the digital space, but we have the physical evidence of his escape plan right here." I held up the keyring Amelia had given me, the small silver fob glinting ominously. "This is the master gate override for the underground garage. If we can't get to the main exit, we have to find another way down, fast." We retreated into the relative safety of the empty, dimly lit executive maintenance area, a labyrinth of HVAC units and electrical conduits that was blessedly out of sight of the main security routes. "The main express elevator is probably already frozen on the upper floors," Amelia panted, leaning against a cold metal wall, her previous composure completely gone, replaced by sheer terror of her brother's betrayal. "The only other descent route is the freight elevator bay, but that requires level 5 clearance, which he revoked the second he initiated the lockdown." "We don't need clearance, we need momentum," I countered, my mind racing, desperately searching for any overlooked architectural flaw. The freight elevator shafts are usually adjacent to the main electrical risers. If we can get to the maintenance platform for that shaft, we can descend manually, even if the lift is stopped, by using the emergency brake release mechanism. We moved through the maze of machinery, Amelia surprisingly resourceful despite her panic. She pointed out service tunnels marked only on older blueprints she'd seen years ago. We were running on fumes of adrenaline, acutely aware that every second wasted was another second Marcus gained toward boarding that flight. We finally located the service hatch leading into the vertical space of the freight lift well. It was a heavy metal door secured by a standard magnetic lock, the kind designed to keep casual employees out, not high-level security teams. "Stand back," I told Amelia. I took the master gate override fob from the keyring. It was an advanced piece of hardware designed for massive physical security infrastructure. I flipped the fob over, revealing a small, recessed auxiliary port. "What are you doing?" Amelia asked, watching me fumble with a tiny screwdriver I pulled from my pocket, a relic from a minor home repair years ago. "Marcus is a creature of habit," I explained, my voice strained as I worked the housing open. He wouldn't use a standard, easily traceable security signal for his primary escape gate. He would link the garage gate to the building's master access code, believing the feds would only be looking at the digital logs. This fob is designed to interface with localized magnetic locks if the primary network is down. It's a failsafe for him. I managed to expose the internal circuitry, revealing a tiny pin connector. I then carefully jammed the tip of my screwdriver into the connector, creating a short circuit that overloaded the magnetic lock's temporary buffer. There was a loud thunk, and the heavy metal door swung inward, revealing the dark, cavernous space of the elevator shaft. The smell of ozone and machine oil rushed out. "Go, go," I urged Amelia toward the narrow maintenance catwalk running alongside the massive stopped freight car. We scrambled onto the narrow steel grating just as we heard voices entering the corridor we'd just left. "He's here! They breached the 47th floor service lock," a guard shouted, his voice echoing in the shaft. We were trapped in the open, exposed on the catwalk, with the lights of the arriving security details sweeping the opening behind us. "The brake release is usually on the top car chassis," I yelled over the noise, pointing upward into the darkness where the massive freight car hung motionless. "We have to climb onto the roof of the car." Climbing a sheer metal surface in near darkness, with heavy boots pounding just feet away, was pure terror. Amelia, motivated by the betrayal, found a desperate strength, scrambling onto the roof of the car just as the first beam of a powerful tactical flashlight cut into the shaft entrance. "There they are! Stop them!" We were fully exposed on top of the motionless elevator car, 45 stories up, with no cover. "The release!" I shouted, crawling toward the emergency access hatch on the roof. I located the heavy, rusted lever marked Emergency Brake Release. I slammed my weight onto the lever. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, with a grinding, shrieking sound that echoed like a dying beast through the entire building, the massive car lurched downward. We weren't controlling the descent. We had just disabled the brakes. The car dropped like a stone. The air rushed past us, deafening us. The movement was so violent that I had to dig my fingers into the seams of the roof panel to keep from being thrown off. I saw Amelia clinging on beside me, her face a pale mask of shock and fear, as the darkness rushed up to meet us. We were plummeting toward the garage level, but the speed was uncontrollable, lethal. "The manual override should reset near the ground level," I screamed, trying to steady myself against the G-force. "Hold on!" As we reached what felt like the lower 10th floor, the car slammed violently against a safety buffer, throwing us forward. The impact jarred the system, and with a deafening metallic clang, the automatic brakes caught with incredible force, snapping the car to a near-instantaneous halt. The sudden deceleration slammed my chest into the metal roof, knocking the wind out of me. When my vision cleared, Amelia was coughing violently beside me. We were still 40 feet above the concrete floor of the underground garage, but through the small opening in the lift doors, I could see the cavernous space. And I saw a sleek, black armored sedan idling near the emergency exit ramp, its engine running. And standing beside the driver's side door, pulling on black leather driving gloves, was Marcus Thorne. He hadn't fled yet. He was just waiting for his final security sweep to clear the lower levels. He looked up, alerted by the violent shudder of the freight car stopping directly above his escape route. He looked straight up, and his eyes locked onto ours. He didn't look panicked. He looked annoyed, like we were just inconvenient traffic. He calmly reached into his jacket, pulled out a small, specialized remote control, and pressed a button. The massive hydraulic barrier protecting the executive exit ramp, the final barrier between him and freedom, began to rumble closed, slowly but surely sealing him into the only route to the outside world. And beneath that barrier, right next to his idling car, I could clearly see a small, crumpled document lying on the floor. The boarding pass stub for the flight he was planning to take. "He's closing the gate," Amelia screamed, scrambling to the edge of the car roof. "We're trapped!" And then, just as Marcus gave us a final, smug wave before turning to enter his car, a different sound cut through the chaos. The heavy crunch of tires on concrete, followed by the unmistakable, urgent blare of official police sirens echoing down the ramp from the main access road, closing in fast. The arrival of the police sirens was the cavalry I hadn't dared hope for, but their arrival was dangerously close to being too late. Marcus Thorne, caught mid-escape, stood frozen for a fraction of a second between his idling armored car and the swiftly closing security gate. He spared one last furious glance upward at Amelia and me, trapped precariously on top of the stopped freight elevator car, before making a split-second decision. He didn't try to enter his car. Instead, he hurled the small remote control, the one that sealed the gate, against the steel barrier, then spun around and sprinted directly toward the emergency stairwell leading up, away from the approaching sirens, banking on his deep knowledge of the building's hidden routes to evade the authorities converging on the garage. "He's running up," Amelia yelled, pointing toward the access door adjacent to the stairwell, which Marcus had clearly left ajar in his haste. "He's trying to get back to the executive floor." But the police presence was already deploying. 2 squad cars, followed by a small detachment of federal agents, Davis and Miller among them, having apparently realized the severity of the financial crime trumped the initial digital inquiry, screeched to a halt just outside the descending hydraulic gate, which was now only about 5 feet from sealing shut. "Federal agents, freeze all activity!" Davis's voice boomed through a megaphone, cutting through the industrial din. The agents immediately focused on Marcus's abandoned vehicle, recognizing it as high-end, likely equipped with secure communication gear, but their attention was split. They hadn't seen us yet, dangling 40 feet above the scene. "We have to get their attention, Alex," Amelia cried, her voice cracking with adrenaline. I looked down at the discarded remote control lying near the edge of the closed security barrier. It was useless now, but what was useful was the small, heavy bolt cutter I'd spotted tucked into the freight elevator's emergency toolkit when we first accessed the shaft. "Use the keys," I instructed Amelia, pointing to the massive brass keyring she still clutched. "Find the key that looks like it services heavy machinery locks. We can't wait for them to spot us." Amelia, operating on pure instinct fueled by betrayal, rummaged through the ring, finding a large, unwieldy key that looked decades old, designed for manual overrides on ancient systems. She shoved it toward the main door to the freight car itself, finding the manual access panel. With a desperate twist, she managed to manually disengage the car's primary safety interlocks. "Now what?" she asked, wiping sweat from her eyes. "We make noise," I said. I located the heavy bolt cutter. I positioned myself near the edge of the catwalk opening, directly above the abandoned armored car. When I cut this cable, the car is going to fall the remaining 40 feet. The noise will bring everyone's eyes up here. It was a massive risk. The landing would be brutal, potentially crippling. But it was the only way to force the authorities to look away from Marcus's escape route and toward the actual evidence of the financial plot, the vehicle he left behind. "Do it," Amelia urged. I focused, ignoring the shaking in my arms, and brought the bolt cutters down hard on the thickest tension cable supporting the freight car's emergency braking mechanism, a cable that, when cut, would release the residual upward tension, causing the entire structure to settle violently onto the final buffers. The snap was deafening, a sound like a cannon firing in the enclosed space. The freight car lurched once more, settling the last few feet with a monstrous crunch that showered the area below with dust and sparks. Every head in the garage snapped upward. Agents instantly leveled their weapons toward the source of the noise. "We're up here," Amelia screamed, waving her arms frantically from the catwalk. "He's running up the service stairs. Marcus Thorne. He just aborted the financial extraction." Agent Davis, recognizing Amelia's voice and realizing the potential for a fugitive within the building, immediately redirected his team. Miller, take 5 and secure the service stairwell leading to the executive suites. The suspect is attempting to flee on foot. While the bulk of the team focused on the ascending threat, Agent Davis approached the abandoned sedan, his weapon still trained on us, but his gaze now analytical. He circled the vehicle, finally noticing the boarding pass stub lying near the driver's door. He picked it up, his expression confirming everything. "Mr. Thorne," Davis called up, lowering his weapon slightly as he recognized the gravity of the situation unfolding above and below him. "We see the evidence of the vehicle and the intent to flee. We are securing the suspect now. Stay put. Do not attempt to climb down." A few tense minutes later, the sound of a brief but decisive struggle echoed from the stairwell above, followed by the heavy thud of Marcus Thorne being subdued. The crisis had passed. Marcus was apprehended not long after, found hiding in a rarely used archival storage room on the top floor, his elaborate escape thwarted by the sheer noise and chaos we created. Later that night, sitting in a temporary, secure location while the financial forensics teams dissected the evidence Marcus had been so desperate to erase, the pieces finally clicked into place with devastating clarity. Davis presented the findings. "Marcus Thorne didn't just want to remove you as a romantic rival, Alex. He was siphoning assets from the family trust for years, preparing to dissolve the overseas holdings, the ones Elena was auditing, and disappear. Your suspicion about the encryption flaw in your journal was accurate. It was the loose thread he couldn't risk anyone pulling. He framed you for the digital side job so that when the massive vault wipe happened, the initial investigation would point to you, the disgruntled fiancé with a history of instability, rather than him, the devoted, high-level executive. He knew you'd be detained while he cleaned up his digital tracks." He looked at Amelia, who was sitting rigidly beside me, her face ashen. "Your brother used the fact that you share digital access rights with Alex to plant the malicious software component, knowing you would send it innocently. He designed the scenario perfectly to leverage your trust in him against both of you." Amelia finally turned to me, her eyes brimming with a remorse that felt genuine, deep, and painful. "I was the weakness," she whispered. "I chose his narrative over yours because I didn't want to believe the man who raised me could be that cruel. I'm so sorry, Alex. He used me to destroy you." "He used all of us," I replied quietly, taking her hand. The feeling of betrayal was still a raw wound, but the shared trauma, the fight for survival, and the necessary alignment against the true villain had forged something undeniable between us. The foundation of trust had been shattered, yes, but what remained wasn't the fragile illusion of a perfect relationship. It was a hard, battle-tested alliance. The charges against me, involving the digital breach concerning Elena, were quietly dropped as Marcus's confession, extracted after days of intense interrogation regarding the stolen assets, implicated him entirely in the orchestration of the frame-up. The photos of my past dates were dismissed as Marcus's attempts to manufacture motive. The resolution wasn't the fairy tale wedding we had planned. Amelia eventually decided she couldn't face the ghost of her brother within the family structure. She walked away from the empire, taking only what she could prove was legally hers, and thankfully she didn't take the inheritance Marcus had tried to steal. Weeks later, we were standing on a quiet stretch of coastline, far from boardrooms and security alerts. "So, no more highly detailed background checks for me?" I teased gently, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Amelia leaned into me, the tension finally easing from her posture. "No more background checks, Alex. Just full disclosure. Always. I've learned that the biggest threats often wear the most familiar faces." She paused, looking out at the relentless, unforgiving ocean. "You were never my first choice, Alex, but after all of this, you are definitely my last."